The Board of Deans of Maastricht University, at the recommendation of its faculties and after consultation with the University Council, has decided to award an honorary doctorate to Professor Michael Ignatieff. And we're first going to watch a video.
Michael Ignatieff is a celebrated historian, writer, and public intellectual. His fight for academic freedom inspires both staff and students. Ignatieff has held senior academic posts at the universities of Harvard and Toronto, and currently serves as the rector and president of the Central European University. His most recent book, The Ordinary Virtues, Moral Order in a Divided World, earned him the Sakharov Prize. Ignatieff has frequently contributed to the global human rights debate. He has traveled across the globe to explore what globalization is doing to our conscience and our moral understanding. Michael Ignatieff's work on the successes, failures, and prospects of the human rights revolution, the language of rights, and the influence of human rights on the ordinary virtues has been hugely influential, far beyond the realm of academia.
Michael Ignatieff is a true gain for Maastricht University. His battle for academic freedom and key values of open societies inspires both our students and our staff. His contribution to the debate on human rights and ordinary virtues helps us understand the role of law in moral globalization. That is why I am the promoter of Michael Ignatieff as honorary doctor of Maastricht University.
Invite Professor Michael Ignatieff and Professor Monica Klaas, whom the Board of Deans appointed as supervisor. Please come forward.
A historian by training, Michael Ignatieff is an award-winning writer, a novelist, a commentator on contemporary issues of democracy, human rights and governance. He has held academic posts at King's College, Cambridge, the University of Toronto and the University of British Columbia, and he was a university professor of Harvard University. He's also a former politician and a former TV host. But above all, Michael Ignatieff is an eloquent and outspoken advocate for liberal constitutional values, an open society, and academic freedom. He stands for open societies where free minds, free politics, and free institutions flourish. Yet as a true intellectual, he does not take these values for granted. He questions them constantly, and he challenges his many audiences to do the same, as we have experienced yesterday and this morning. He challenges us too, academics, to confront and critically review our common wisdoms, whether they concern human rights and their role in diverse societies, ordinary virtues such as trust and tolerance, liberty, freedom and equality, or indeed European values, the values of constitutionalism and rule of law. His work is inspirational for us all, and for lawyers in particular, you may be surprised to hear, as it is deeply connected to the values and principles underlying any system of law. We are deeply grateful, Professor Ignatieff, for your contributions to these debates. Now, in his current role as rector and president of the Central European University in Budapest, Michael Ignatieff has found himself in the middle of a political storm, where academic freedom and the institutional autonomy of an excellent community of scholars and a truly transnational university, very much like our own, is under siege and is effectively, at least in part, being expelled from a European state. He is experiencing firsthand the challenges to the rule of law and academic freedom, now that the open society that is so dear to him is submitted to the stress test. Yet here too, he does not simply take up the gauntlet and fight for the existence of his university and for academic freedom, which he obviously does and does very well. But as the true academic that he is, he listens carefully to his adversaries, and he tries to understand why his university and universities and academic elites more generally are no longer taken for granted, and why facts and scientific truths are challenged. He carefully subjects the open society itself to re-evaluation and reinterpretation, and he does not shy away from inviting those holding opposing views to the debate. And now he's trying to figure out how we should deal with the destabilizing effect that technological change and globalization have on the authority system that used to define what knowledge is. Because despite the difficulties it comes with, Michael Ignatieff remains a radical believer in pluralist open societies and their values, and he stands to defend these ideals with the most determinations. Professor Ignatieff, it is an incredible honor to have you here with us. Your work has been truly inspirational for us all, and we too take up the challenge to constantly review and reimagine open societies and their foundational values. And on this, we stand with you and with the Central European University. By the authority vested in me by law and in conformity with the decision of the Board of Deans, I hereby confer upon you, Professor Ignatieff, the degree of Doctor Honoris Causa and all the rights deriving therefrom by law and tradition. As evidence of this, I present to you the degree certificate signed by the rector, the dean of the Faculty of Law, and myself, and affixed with the Great Seal of the University. And I put on your shoulders the kappa, which signifies the honor bestowed upon you. Thank you. There you go. It's done.
Thank you.
Well, like Amitav, I feel a little overwhelmed. We've been through an experience together. It bonds us for life, although we hardly know each other. And it's an honor to be here with you, Amitav, and it's an honor to be with Sigrid Kaag, a great international civil servant. It's also, you've got quality control in the room because my beloved wife is here as well, and I'd like to acknowledge her place in my life. And I accept this honorary degree with great pleasure, not just for myself, or not even at all for myself, but in recognition of Central European University and the battle that we've fought for academic freedom. I wanted to talk a little bit about that with you because it's the case that you learn most about what you truly believe when you have to fight for it. And we've had to fight for it. And I've learned a lot about what I actually believe from the combat, and I want to share a few thoughts with you about that. The attack on CU was purely political. The government never claimed that we'd failed in our educational mission, and they never tried to prove that their new requirements that they imposed on us, establishing a new campus or finding a new bilateral agreement with them, were justified on educational grounds. And when we complied with those demands, despite disagreeing with them, they said, oh, let's change and ask you for some more. So that taught us, I think, one thing that's very important, which is that academic freedom is very difficult to maintain in regimes of pure arbitrary power. Academic freedom and the rule of law are simply inseparable. The other thing we learned is that academic freedom and the rule of law are very fragile. And their new enemy is a weaponized rhetoric of democracy that pits the will of the people against the elites, be they judges, professors, writers, politicians, or journalists, anyone who dares to challenge the majority in the name of law, facts, reason, or even prudence. And these single-party regimes, like the communist ones they've replaced, want to monopolize politics for themselves. And so every time a university like mine sought to defend ourselves, we were told we were playing politics. So what do you do when you're told that your defense is playing politics? It's a very difficult dilemma, a real dilemma, as our rector Magnificus knows, and I've had to discover, because we're not political organizations. Our job is not to challenge government. When there are demonstrations in the streets, of course, our teachers and students can and should take part as individuals. But a university as an institution has no business joining in. We weaken our authority when we wade into daily politics. So we have a delicate balancing act, that is to engage in a kind of non-political politics, defending our own freedom, not only for ourselves but for the sake of others, without being sucked into partisan politics that becomes fatal to our legitimacy as institutions. This is a very difficult balancing act that I've had to live for 2 years, and I hope nobody else in the Netherlands ever has to do it either. It's not fun. The other thing, we had to reach out to the public and say that we weren't simply defending ourselves. We weren't simply defending a set of privileges. We were defending democracy itself, to the degree that academic freedom is intrinsic to a democratic society. When I look around you today and I see the way we look in all these splendid gowns, I realize once again that we're among the oldest self-governing communities in Europe. Many universities in this part of the world are more than 1,000 years old. This university will one day be 1,000 years old. And the European idea of self-government, communities governing themselves freely, incubated in the university. And that's why our connection between academic freedom and democracy is close and intense and historical. Today, we're no longer closed communities of scholars. We're open to the whole world, and because we recruit teachers and students who usually disagree about everything, especially about politics. But we all agree about one thing, which is that there is such a thing as knowledge. And our job, our vocation, our purpose is to share that passion and love of knowledge and extend its fragile empire wherever we can. There are many single-party state regimes in the world today. Hungary is only one. Serbia, Romania, Russia, Turkey, China, possibly India, who are trying to bring universities under control. And the attack on CU inside Hungary drew strength from what the regime believed is a global authoritarian trend. The Hungarian prime minister, believe me, I'm not using this occasion to launch a political attack on the prime minister. He's duly elected. But he did say one thing we should all pay close attention to. He said in a recent speech, he made a grandiose but characteristic remark. He said, "We Hungarians used to think Europe was our future. Now we think Hungary should be your future." That's a remark to think about. It's a remark to be taken seriously. Universities in Western Europe may believe their academic freedom is beyond challenge. I certainly hope it is, but I wouldn't be so sure. Universities are more vulnerable than ever to the upsurge of populist anger at both ends of the political spectrum. Universities, for example, did not create the growing gulf between the incomes of those with education and those without, but were blamed for those inequalities nonetheless. And while we always passionately believe that we're part of the solution by trying to make university education accessible to everybody, there are a lot of people out there who think we're part of the problem. So what are we to do? Maastricht is a very interesting example. I've learned a great deal. It's my second visit. I learned a great deal from the ways in which Maastricht has aligned itself with the economic revitalization of an entire region that spans 3 countries. It's an extraordinary story. Other universities, I think, need to listen to Maastricht and learn from your example. They need to do the same. They need to build links with unions, civil society organizations, primary and secondary schools, technical colleges, political parties of all stripes, constantly working outwards, refusing that temptation we all have to close into the comfortable bubble of our own little worlds,
and make learning available to the societies we serve, and opening our classrooms up to students who never would have dreamed that they could come through our doors. We also need to be brave enough to challenge our own largely liberal and progressive orthodoxies, making a place for points of view at the edges of the spectrum of constitutional politics. Too often we use our gatekeeping function as curators of the public space for debate in the 21st century to validate only what we feel comfortable hearing. And when we do this, we lose the trust of the societies we need to serve. But it's not enough just to defend our own academic freedom or our role as democratic gatekeepers. I think the challenge to universities has gone further. There's now an attack on the authority of knowledge itself by merchants of conspiracy theory, by the promoters of organized paranoia and the world of pseudo-facts. The internet could have become the greatest instrument for the democratization of knowledge in history. Instead, it's become a machine to demolish the authority of knowledge itself and the civil exchange in which truth is winnowed from lies. And one of the things that I feel very strongly, having been in a single-party state for 2 years, is the ways in which our emotions, our very emotions, are being structured by the modern engineers of human souls, the political technologists who specialize in disinformation and the cultivation of hatred. Doing our jobs in this environment is pretty tough, because the legitimacy of what we do and the reflective civility we need to do it are both under attack. Let me use a controversial example, but it gets at this ways in which our emotions are being reworked. 3.5 years ago, in September 2015, right across Europe, generosity, compassion, and mercy were on display as strangers came to our gates, and human beings reacted as people do towards distress and fear and loneliness. They responded with blankets and water and a bed for the night. Then the political technologists went to work, and now these emotions, these initial emotions of generosity and compassion, have been systematically confiscated right across Europe. To be generous to a stranger is thought to be a fool. To be compassionate is thought to be naive. To display solidarity towards the desperate is recast as loyalty and even betrayal to your own. And we need to understand the ways at which a whole new climate of fear and hatred has been normalized across Europe. Our emotions are being reworked, and the result is a coarsening of all of us. I don't accept myself, I'm not talking about anybody else, I'm talking about us. A coarsening of our own inner emotional feelings, a deadening of feeling that can lay the road open to cruelty and tyranny. Obviously, a university can't fight the age we live in, and Amitav Ghosh has a sense that the age we've lived in is now ending and a new, darker age may be coming. But we do need to defend what he called, it was the title of one of his early novels, he called it the circle of reason. We need to defend the circle of reason. And we need to remember finally, and here I speak as a teacher, we need to remember what our job is. And one of the greatest definitions of what our job is was given by a great Eastern European philosopher called Jan Patočka. Jan Patočka was fired from his job and instead went to work teaching Aristotle in homes and factories and wherever he could do it, and he taught Aristotle in a period when he'd been thrown out of the university and forced to teach, provide education for those who had no access from it. And he used the phrase, when he was asked what he did, he said, "We're in the business of the care of souls." And the care of souls, it does seem to me to be the core of what a university is for. Patočka took his intellectual vocation from the insight that communist regimes damaged souls and that knowledge could repair a soul. And that seems to me deeply true. And we need to understand the sense in which the regimes we live in, even some Western democratic ones, damage our souls. And we need to embrace our vocation, which is to repair souls and render them more resilient. And our work is very basic, to teach our students that there is such a thing as knowledge, and that once you've found it, it's the only reliable guide for responsible action in this world. And we need to warn our students and ourselves to the danger to our souls of believing that compassion, mercy, and generosity are the province of dupes and traitors. We need to alert our students and ourselves to the danger of believing that science is an elite conspiracy against the sound instincts of the majority. And we need to proclaim that democracy needs many things, but chief among them is a citizenry with the independence of mind and the resilience of heart to care for their own souls and the souls around them. Thank you.
Dear Professor Ignatieff, I have nothing to add. Thank you so much. This was your second visit, and there will be many more to follow. We'll make sure that will happen.